This first article of the Hindu is related to the fiscal deficit targets that the government has given in budget 2018 and 19. In short, I'm going to discuss it because it's not that important and not that interesting. So overall, the article is trying to say that the fiscal deficit rule has been honored more in breach than in observance. That means whatever the goals regarding fiscal deficit India made, okay, they have been honored more with respect to their breach. Okay, we have violated the rules more than their observance. So the article is saying that the FRBM Act, which is the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003, it basically targeted a fiscal deficit to GDP ratio of around 3%. Okay, and this was to be achieved only in once. Sorry, I'm sorry. So this was to be achieved, fine. But then this particular target of fiscal deficit to GDP ratio around 3%, it was achieved only once, and that was in 2007 and 2008 when it was 2.5%. Now, what happened after this? We know that in 2008 we had the financial crisis. Okay, so after that, government it tried to actually increase the this upper limit of the fiscal deficit, because there were certain sectors with respect to the social security issues and different issues where the government was not able to keep up to the target of 3%. Okay, now what happened? So the thing is that this particular act, which is FRBM Act 2003, it was amended twice in 2012 and 2015. And the revisions in 2015, it shifted the date for achieving the target 3% to 2017 and 18. So that means we should have achieved the target of fiscal deficit of 3% by 2017 and 18. But obviously our fiscal deficit was around, I guess, I'm not very sure, but it was around 3.5%, I think, or more than that. So you can please check it. Okay, so by this year the amended revenue deficit target was put at 2% of GDP. So the target which was to be achieved with respect to fiscal deficit, it was 3% by 2017-18, and for amended revenue deficit it was 2%. Okay, now budget 2018-19 has proposed amending the FRBMA Act again. Okay, and which will shift the target of 3% fiscal deficit to GDP ratio to March 2021. So we are again increasing the time limit. Okay, and important and interesting thing is that no target has been set for revenue deficit, which was earlier 2% of GDP. Okay, now, missing the fiscal responsibility targets year after year and changing the statutory framework, that means you are amending the FRBMA Act again and again without, achieving the final result. So, it brings the credibility of the government's commitment to fiscal discipline in the spotlight. So, definitely it questions the government's credibility, that whether government is actually sincere and serious regarding its commitment towards bringing fiscal discipline and fiscal consolidation. So it raises a question. Fine. So okay, it's here the too much of data is given in this article. The average rate or margin by which different governments have reduced the fiscal and revenue deficits relative to GDP has been quite low. If we talk with respect to the this state governments as well, so state governments and even the central government have not been possible to attain that desired level of value of fiscal deficit. And it, whatever the targets they have achieved, it was bare minimum. Okay, it was not up to the level, they were quite low. So next they are saying that diluting recommendations, they are saying with respect to this amending the FRBMA Act, they're saying that in the proposed amendment to FRBMA Act, which the budget 2018 and 19 has proposed, the key recommendations of the review committee were not accepted. Okay, And because the review committee, it wanted that the target at which the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio, it should be stabilized and set at 2.5%. But what the budget is saying, it's saying that we will shift the target to 3% and that would be achieved by 2021. But the review committee was saying it to be 2.5%. Okay. And apart from that, second thing, the committee had not given up on the desirability of achieving revenue account balance. See, I have told that in the proposed amendment to FRBM Act, the government has not given any target for the revenue deficit, for the amended revenue deficit, which was around 2%. The target for which was around 2% for the year 2000, which was to be achieved by the year 2017 and 18. But in the proposed amendment, no target has been set. But the review committee, it had no desirability of giving up on the revenue account. I mean, the review committee was not of the view that there should be no target for the amended revenue deficit. Instead, revenue committee was of the view that there should be some target for revenue deficit, but the proposed amendment is not having any sort of target. Okay. Third, the central government did not accept another recommendation of setting up a fiscal council. The original FRBM Act had a provision of setting up a fiscal council which could independently examine the economic case and justification for deviating from the specified targets. So the purpose of this fiscal council was that if the government, it would have missed the this fiscal deficit to GDP target, then this council will examine that what was the economic reason and would try to find out the justification for it, that why the government deviated from its target. But no such council has been set up. Okay. And fourthly, the committee recommendations regarding the debt GDP levels of 60% and 40% of GDP for the general and central governments, which was to be achieved by 2023. The target dates for these also have been shifted to 2024 to 25. So a lot of shift is being seen in the proposed amendment to the FRBM Act. We are simply trying to shift the targets, okay, without achieving bare minimum of them. Now, the article is focusing that, see, hold on. Yeah, the thing is that fiscal risk may also be higher with the reliance on extra budgetary resources for financing a number of ambitious government spending programs, because we have seen that in 2000 this recent budget, okay, the government has focused on areas like agricultural distress, okay, infrastructure, employment generation, these areas, education, health and social sectors. So definitely a lot of funding is required and a lot of investment, public sector investment is required in these sectors. So from where the funds will come? So the funds will come either from the budgetary support or from the extra budgetary support. So the budgetary support, which is basically given to these kind of investments, is only 16.4% of the outlay, and the balance around 83.6% is to be raised from the extra budgetary support. Now if the government is focusing more on the extra budgetary support, so definitely government has to do borrowing, and dependence on borrowing for these extra budgetary resources along with the borrowing which is required by the state government. See, one borrowing is by the state governments and the other is by the central government to fulfill all these policy measures. So government has to borrow more, fine. So definitely, and at the same time the saving rate is falling, so it's going to put pressure on interest rates. Okay, so that is not desirable and that is not required. And the article is saying that many a times people say that whether we should follow these rules which are being in this FRBM Act or not. Some people ask whether it is at all necessary to have such rules as mandated by fiscal deficits on inflation targets. Fine. So see, this is an old debate that whether we should follow the rules or we should follow our own discretion. If the rules are too rigid, obviously they're bound to be breaked if the rules are too rigid. But a complete abandonment of rules can lead to instability. You cannot altogether, this, I mean, and deviate yourself and separate yourself from the rules, because certain sorts of rules are required for a stable life in general. So definitely even in economy and even in this fiscal consolidation, okay, we need certain sort of rules. So that's why this writer is saying that in India, the fiscal deficit rule in India has been honored more in breach. We have breached the rules more than following them. Okay, so fiscal deficit needs continued vigilance. So this is the final solution with respect to the FRBM Act and the kind of fiscal deficit target we are having in our country. Okay. Now, this second article is not from the Hindu, but it's from the Indian Express, because nowadays many of the articles in Hindu are too much politically motivated and most of the time they are against the budget. So we need to look the different dimensions. It's basically related to international relations and specifically with respect to the Middle East, because we are seeing the change in dynamics, okay, the change in the equations India is having with respect to the Middle East. So let's see what C. Raja Mohan is trying to say. He he's saying that, see, we know that Middle East, it is suffering from orthodoxy, conservatism, and religious fundamentalism, all these kind of things in countries like Iran's, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these countries. But now the women in Iran, they're taking off their headscarves in a bold protest against Iran's rule. And this, in public they have to wear the veil. It was the first prohibition imposed by the Islamic Republic after 1979 revolution. See, Iran was earlier an ally of USA. It was not that orthodox. Okay, it was only after 1979, when the Islamic Revolution took place, that Iran, it followed the line of too much conservatism. Okay, and at that time this was the first prohibition that women need to wear some sort of veil in public places. Similarly, now women in Saudi Arabia, they're learning how to drive. Okay, because they are awaiting legal sanction this summer. Okay, so and Riyadh has also lifted a 4-decade old ban on movie theaters. So we are seeing that the current wave which is in the Middle East is regarding liberation from the social controls imposed in the name of religion, is one of the many surprising turns in the Middle East. So this is quite an interesting trend which can be seen in Middle East. Another one is the question for moderate Islam. Actually, people in these Islamic nations, they are seeking for moderate Islam. Okay, and the key leaders of the region like Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt, Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of UAE, and Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, they have all made reclaiming Islam from the clutches of extremist groups. Okay, so this is very important, and this is how the equation within the Middle East is also changing. Okay, now see, India is because we are seeing that how the different engagements of India is having, and our Prime Minister is visiting Middle East. First of all, he'll be visiting, this Jordan, then this Palestine, and then I guess, I'm not very sure. Yes, Oman and UAE as well. So India, and in the next month, coming month, India is expected to host President Hassan Rouhani from Iran. So we are trying to engage with the Middle East at different fronts, be it UAE, be it Saudi, be it Oman, be it Israel, be it Palestine. We're trying to engage with each country bilaterally. Okay, so see, Although Delhi's relations with the Middle East, they have greater traction, but many feel that there is a need for the articulation of objectives and a strategy to achieve them. I mean, many people they think that India needs to be more vocal, and India needs to strategize the entire policy towards West. Okay, means we need to have a formal look West policy on the lines of look East policy. Okay, because we have recently celebrated this the success of our look east policy. Okay, when we invited the Asian nations representatives on our 69th Republic Day celebrations. So this shows that how look east policy have benefited, I mean mutual benefit has been seen. Okay, so on the same line there should be a look west policy, but the writer is saying that comparisons between the regions to India's east and west are not very useful. Okay, so the one major difference, and the bigger difference is that the east region, I mean in East Asia, there is an institutional framework that facilitates India's regional diplomacy. Okay, India has been able to engage with the Southeast nations, and that's because of the ASEAN, a platform which was basically acting as a catalyst between the relationship between India and the Southeast Asians. So there is an institutional framework which basically facilitated this relationship between India and Southeast Asia. But no such forum exists in the Middle East. This is the major reason that we cannot think of strategizing or making a formal look west policy, because in order to have a formal look west policy we need to have certain platform to engage with, and that's why we are trying to engage more bilaterally with the Middle East nations. Okay, so and whatever the groupings the Middle East is having, they're like Arab League or the Organization of Islamic Conference, which were really not effective. Okay, and even the Gulf Cooperation Council, it's seeing fault lines within itself, because the Saudi UAE effort to marginalize other member of the GCC is part of the story. We know that how the Saudi UAE led these both countries, how they had a conflict with Yemen. Okay, so this is the thing, that there is no institutional framework. Second thing is that the Asians process driven diplomacy with multiple lines of continuous engagement puts pressure on India to stay focused on its look east policy. ASEAN has a kind of policy that they try to have a regular meetings or periodic meetings, which basically had a certain sort of I should say pressure on India to focus more on its look east policy. So this look east policy which India had, it was not unidirectional. Okay, it was mutually benefiting both ASEAN and India, and that's why there is a pressure from Asian nations as well on India to put more efforts on its look east policy and to convert it into act east policy, which we have done now. Okay, and apart from that, definitely leadership is also critical for success in a region ruled more. But the issue is that in Middle East, most of the regions, they are ruled by monarchs and strong rulers. So this is also a problem with respect to West. Okay, now one important reason for Delhi's success east of India has been the absence of domestic political discord of the region. Third reason, apart from this, first is institutional framework, absence of institutional framework in Middle East. Second is this, Asians process-driven diplomacy, and third is that the political instability which is existing in Middle East. Okay, this is also a factor that we cannot have a formal policy regarding that, because in Middle East we can see that ideological, political and religious divisions, okay, they are also in there. Soon after the partition of the subcontinent produced a set of outcomes that complicated India's relations with the Middle East. Okay, so okay, now the present situation in Middle East is that while religion remains important, okay, pan-Islamism is no longer a dominant force in shaping the politics of the region. Religion is important, Islam is important, but pan-Islamism is not so important. Sectarian divisions is, sectarianism is there. It has been seen that Shia Sunni conflict is more than the Arab Israel conflict. See, so we are seeing that how the individual national interest, they are overpowering the pan Islamism idea. Okay, so the rise of sectarianism has undercut pan-Islamism while individual national interests have blunted the idea of ethnic Arab solidarity. Okay. Um, Now, they're saying that even after economic reforms, India tries to deepen its, economic relations with the region. Delhi appeared defensive in the region, but India has always been defensive with respect to its interest in this region. Okay, and now we all know that how India has dehyphenated its Israel and Palestinian policy. So the purported dehyphenation of India's ties with Israel and Palestine has not reduced the compulsion of seeing the two relationships as tightly integrated. That although India has dehyphenated the Israel and Palestinian issue, but we are seeing that we had this visit from Israel Prime Minister, and soon after that our Prime Minister is visiting Palestine. Okay, and a week after certain weeks our foreign minister is going to visit Israel. So we are seeing that although we have dehyphenated this Israel and Palestinian issue, but they are somehow interlinked. If Israeli prime minister is coming, then Indian prime minister is visiting Palestine, because we have to balance both sides. Okay, so okay, what else is there? I mean, they are focusing on how the political instability is taking place in this region apart from the ISI. See, Sunni monarchies that traditionally look to the United States as their ally, okay, to ensure their security. Now they are taking their matter into their hands. We can see how the Saudi and UAE led, they both had conflict with Yemen. Okay, apart from that, the conflict between Iran and the see, Iran is a Shia dominated country. Okay, so that's why the conflict between Iran and the Sunni Muslims today is stronger than that between Arabs and Israel. Hardly makes an impression on the Indian debate. So this is the reason that we can say that a lot of political instability and lot of new equations are developing in this region, that India cannot altogether have a very formalized policy or very a stable policy with respect to the West. Okay, navigating the multiple internal contradictions in the Middle East has never been easy for external powers, and that's why Middle East has been the area of conflict. It's very unstable and it's very a problematic area for the external powers, and especially like India. Okay, so India may not heed a formal look west policy to realize the new opportunities in the region if Delhi views the Middle East on its own merits. Okay, so what India at most can do is India should look at its own merit, that uh, with which country India should engage more and what policy India should follow. It should be depending on India's own national interest and on the merit of this the situation and merit of the condition and merit of the relationship. We need to look at that. What India can do is to pursue its national interest in this, and right now it's not the I should say the feasible condition where India could heed to a formal look west policy. So this was the article regarding Middle East and all the how the India is approaching Middle East.